Hey there, welcome to another episode of Between the Notes. Normally I talk about a song that I've done or a musician that I've worked with, someone I've arranged music for, performances, people that I perform with in performance. But I thought it'd be interesting today to talk about the notes. I get asked all the time, how do you write notes onto paper? And for many years, when I first started, the very first song that I ever wrote was a song for a girl in 7th grade. She shall remain nameless. But I wrote her a song, and I got a piece of music paper, and I took one of these. You young people, you know what this is. It's called a pencil. And I actually wrote the notes down on a piece of paper, like Bach and Vivaldi and Mozart and Rachmaninoff and Aaron Copland and everybody did. It was a tedious process where you would take, a piece of paper. You would have to write out the treble clef. You'd have to write out the bass clef, whatever you were doing, and the notes, the chords, put the ties in, put the diacritical markings like staccato and so forth. I did that for many years after I wrote that initial song for this girl. By the way, I was trying to remember, I think I remember the name of the song. So I wrote her this thing because I figured she'd be super impressed that a guy in 7th grade wrote her a song. And I couldn't think of a name. It was like a piano song. So I looked at the bottom of the sheet music, and it was a company called Passantino that was on the bottom of the sheet music. So I named the song Passantino. Sorry, Nancy, I hope that didn't burst your bubble, that you didn't think it meant you are beautiful or something. Anyway, that you are. So anyway, for years and years, that's what I would do. And finally, in the mid to late 80s, 1980s, last century, computers came out and computer music started. At first, I remember there was a company called Finale that was the first one I became aware of. There's a couple that preceded that, but that's the first one that really kind of make a splash. I bought the program, but it was kind of tedious to work with. And so I did hand copy for a few more years after that until finally I could see the writing on the wall. And I learned how to use this program. And so this program, and I'll demonstrate it here, it allowed you to hook up your keyboard. And then as you would play on the keyboard, whatever notes you played on the keyboard would show up on the computer. And it was, I wouldn't say it was as tedious, certainly not as tedious as pencil writing, but it did take a while. You had to get it just right. Early on, the program wasn't super efficient, but it was a huge step in the right direction, and I could see the writing on the wall. Up to that point, whenever I had to write a song, for example, this one called Summer Portrait, I wrote it in very little pencil on a piece of sheet music shown here. Then I would give it to my copyists. And the copyists at the time, I remember Fred Smith and the Butters, Greg, Leslie Butters, they would take it with their incredible hand. They would do everything in pen and would copy it out meticulously for the session that was happening the next day. They were worth their weight in gold in those days. So, I've showed you the score here then. So they had to write out on the score, there was the flute, the oboe, the clarinet, the French horns, the piano, guitar, percussion, violins, violas, cellos, and bass. That was what was made up of the orchestration for that piece. They then would take each of the songs and put it in handwritten music. There's the flute part, here's the oboe part, here's the bass part, and so forth. You can imagine back in the old days when Beethoven or somebody like that had to do it, they would, it was incredible. I mean, they had to write out for every orchestra a brand new score and all these parts and would pass it to the orchestras. These days, of course, it's different. We'll get to that in a minute. So in the late 80s, I switched to Finale and I started learning computer engraving. And probably since the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, I have done nothing but. So bye-bye pencil, bye-bye sheet music. I now live in a world that most composers do, which is music where everything is typed into the computer, played or typed into the computer. Lyrics, chords, everything. It's such a part of my writing now that I can't really, I could, but it's not pleasant for me to write music without a computer. Whether it be a laptop, even an iPad now, you can do some things. But I write music in front of a computer. It's really been amazing. And then when it's time, I write the score, I type it in, play it in, then I can even listen to it. I can press a button and listen to the way it sounds before I print out the parts. The parts that used to be handwritten, now they get extracted, flute, oboe, clarinet, horns, they all come out. I print them, take them to the recording session, and there you go. There's more technology, of course, but now that's the way it's done. It's getting faster, it's getting better. I had a little bit of a scare 2 years ago, about this time of year. Finale, the program that I had used for 4 decades, that I was super proficient in, and really was a wonderful program, suddenly declared, we are no longer in business. The program, while it will still work, we're not going to do any technical support. And if you upgrade your operating system, chances are the program is going to glitch. So best of luck, composers around the world. You'll need to learn a new language. I know if anybody's watching this who's a composer, you'll remember that day. It was like we were calling each other in tears saying, what are we going to do? It was kind of like we had been speaking English all these years, and suddenly someone said, starting tomorrow, we're all going to speak Portuguese. It was that drastic. So there are other programs out there. I don't know all of them by name, but the ones that come to mind are Sibelius, Dorico. That's the one that I upgraded to. And it was painful. I waited until the beginning of this year, and after Christmas was over, I said, I'm going to learn how to use this program no matter what happens. And I forced myself to go back to school and learn this program, and it's been worth the effort. It's a great program. A lot of guys that used to work for Finale now work for Dorico, and I'm sure Sibelius is good too, but I haven't had experience using that. But Dorico, it's worth the effort. So anyway, that's a little behind the scenes of music writing. What's in the future? Well, there are already things happening using AI and so forth. You could now, instead of using a keyboard, you can sing your part in. If you want to sing a trumpet part, sing that in a microphone. And now the computers are good enough where they can actually determine and print out what that is. There's still some things that make it kind of impossible. The music is interesting because if I just sing it doesn't know that I'm playing swing, which is 8th notes that are swung. If I were writing that out, I'd write out 8th notes and say swing on it. But the computer might do dotted 8/16ths or triplets. So there's a few things that AI and computers are going to have to learn. I also use an iPad when I'm writing and when I'm playing music. Or even when I'm conducting music, if it's not too big a score, I'll use an iPad. And it comes in super handy because you could store all your music, thousands of pieces of music in PDF. So if you're interested in using an iPad, either for reading scores, reading sheet music in a choir, whatever, here's what I'd recommend. Get an Apple iPad, make sure that it's the largest size, which is iPad Pro. You don't, however, need to spend the thousands of dollars that the latest, greatest iPad costs, because you're not going to use it for music except to store PDFs and a program called Fourscore. Fourscore is kind of the 90% of the musicians I know use that. You can use other things, but Fourscore is great because it's got music in mind. There's so many features that it does. If they'll sponsor me, maybe I'll tell you about them. But no, you can actually use a Apple Pencil to write on it, to take notes. You can share your bowings if you're a violinist with someone else. You can write in chords and flip it over to the guitar player, and he can read off his iPad. It really is a really life-changing program for musicians. And you don't need a music stand light. You can just sit there. For choir, it's great because you don't have these musicians turning pages. They're just holding a nice iPad and just gently touching it. It looks really professional. So get that, download Fourscore, and then instead of one of these, get an Apple Pencil, because that will allow you to take notes. And one other thing you'll need, you can turn the page if you're in a choir with touching it. But if you're a piano player or a violin player and your hands are not free, then get a pedal. And there's all kinds of pedals out there. You basically need just a page turner. I use a program, I've used one called Page Flip. If you go see Page Flip, and it's it's a lot more expensive than the actual program. And I shouldn't say a lot, it's probably, $65 to $85 to have this, but it's worth its weight in gold. That's what you'll need to capture music on an iPad and to read it. Well, this has been a very quick introduction, kind of a history of how I've used sheet music through the years. It'll always be with us. You can't really stream sheet music. It's not, Spotify's not going to take my job on this one. That's why I still sell sheet music. And computers allow me to print out more and more. So expect more piano music, violin music, vocal music, choir music, and so forth coming out of me in the next little while. I've got thousands of pieces that I have never made available, but now there's no excuse because I got the technology. All right, everybody, thanks a lot. Hope you enjoyed this episode of Between the Notes.